Hey, this Spider-Man movie is just like breaking all records right now. Like people saying that this is movie of the year. Like a real live animated movie is movie of the year. To me, I just seen it today. It's a 10 out of 10. But I just seen the one that came out in 2018 last night, and that was a 10 out of 10. But the movies are like different. I think the first one was like an introduction. Um, it was an introduction slash like they could have just ended it there. Like they could have just ended that movie there because it doesn't coexist with this Spider-Man movie that just came out was last week. But bruh, this new Spider-Man, bruh, the writing, the production, like bro, this movie is phenomenal. Like bruh, they don't lack in no department, bruh. Every Spider-Man come from their own dimension, like got their own little thing going on. Like bro, this movie is low key goaded, bruh.
Alright, let's do this one more time. Every now and then, a film comes along and completely changes the game. 2018 Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is one of those films. Not only did its unique visual style, created by blending CGI with traditional animation and illustration techniques, revolutionize Western animation, but it also popularized the multiverse with mainstream audiences, setting off the boom in multiverse-centric stories we're currently living through. However, while there have been some notable standouts like last year's exceptional Everything Everywhere All at Once, the vast majority of these multiverse films have failed to fully realize the limitless potential of the concept the way Spider-Verse did. Most of these stories have simply lacked imagination, treating the multiverse as a means to indulge in cameos and references, or, to do a little continuity maintenance. The alternate worlds they depict feel like simple palette swaps with none of the wonder or authenticity of Spider-Verse's worlds. As a concept, the multiverse presents an opportunity to create fantastic, impossible places. You're telling me the best you can come up with is a city where the color of the streetlights are inverted? Come on now, give me a break. So it's lucky then that after 4 long years, Daddy's finally back to show us how it's done, and oh boy did they do that. The highly anticipated sequel to Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse, is a reminder of just how invaluable the multiverse can be as a
Like all them Spider-Man, bro. Like you know what's so crazy, bro? I realized like like I told you, I just seen the movie today. I want to say a couple days ago, I watched the video on YouTube of um they was ranking all the Spider-Man, like they was ranking all the Spider-Man, right? Not like I'm talking about all the Spider-Man, like they was ranking all the Spider-Man, like the comics and all that shit, bro. So when I watched this movie right here, or even when I watched the movie last night, and I started seeing some of the Spider, I said, bruh, oh, I know the Spider-Man from I just seen this from the YouTube video. But seeing the joint today, seeing the movie today, I said, bruh, they realized I had the Tyrannosaurus Rex in there. Man, I said, bro, they really had all the Spider-Man, bruh.
storytelling tool when it's approached with boundless imagination and ingenuity. Somehow even more technically impressive than its predecessor, Across the Spider-Verse is a goddamn visual feast, seamlessly integrating more
Hey, that part is so funny. This part
is a goddamn visual feast,
This part is so funny, bruh.
seamlessly integrating more animation styles than should be possible. It might be cliche to say that every frame is a painting, but in this case, it really does feel like each individual cell was deliberately and precisely designed by hand to be a work of art. I mean, half of this movie should be hanging up in a goddamn museum.
Nah,
Every
for real.
moment is legitimately jaw-dropping, with every new character and universe having its own art style tailored to its specific tone, era of origin, or cultural influence. Gwen's world is rendered in dreamy pastel watercolors, making for the most striking scenes in in the entire film. Spider-Man India takes on a more pencil-drawn look in the style of old Indian comic art, while Hobie's is fittingly a cut-and-paste collage of high-impact pop art. Again, combining this many eclectic styles should not work, but somehow it does. They all feel cohesive. And then there's the music. Oh my god, there's the fucking music. Daniel Pemberton continues to secure his place as one of the best to ever do it, with an anarchic score that plays like the love child of Ludwig Göransson, Vangelis, an alt-rock band, and a turntable. His score effortlessly flows between musical styles with as much creative freedom as the visuals, enhancing the mood and atmosphere of every location and narrative beat. Each character gets a distinct and memorable motif that draws on its own specific set of instruments, and when woven together...
Bruh, this movie is real life a masterpiece, bruh. It's like no funny, bruh. This movie is real life a masterpiece, bruh. From start to finish, a real life masterpiece, bruh.
Create a beautiful cacophony that embraces the chaotic energy of the multiverse itself. But above all else, Across the Spider-Verse understands that the multiverse is more than just a cool setting. It's an opportunity to test the very foundation of a story's characters, a funhouse mirror that distorts our world in such a way as to force us to reckon with the things about our lives we often take for granted. A concept perfectly suited for introspective stories that challenge our understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe. Across the Spider-Verse stands shoulder to shoulder with other legendary superhero sequels like Spider-Man 2, X2, and The Dark Knight, exceeding the impossibly high expectations.
Hey, now The Dark Knight, hey, that's a masterpiece too, though. That's literally like one of my favorite movies, bro. The Dark Knight, bro. Masterpiece, bro.
Set by its predecessor to soar to the very pinnacle of the genre. Hell, it might just be one of the best films I've quite frankly ever seen. Period. You know what? Fuck it. It is. It truly is. It's not just a great Spider-Man story.
See, that's the thing. I don't want us to get caught up in the hype and just be like, oh, we just caught up in the hype. Like, no, this movie, bro, is real live. It got every element, like real live, every element, bro. Suspense, drama, emotion based, funny. Like, bro, it got every element, bro. Fire. Like, it's gonna have you on your toes, bro.
It's not just a great comic book movie, it's just a fucking great movie, man. A sharp, soulful exploration of heroism and humanity, told with passion and visual flair. It's a testament to what cinema is capable of when talented artists are given the latitude to realize their vision without compromise. And man, we should be so lucky.
Cherry Cola look makes me feel super bold. I love this look because it really brings me out of my comfort zone. This expressive purple.
What makes us who we are, and is who we are predetermined? These two simple but profound questions of identity and destiny lie at the core of Across the Spider-Verse. Like its predecessor, the film is a Spider-Man story about Spider-Man stories. What makes a Spider-Man story, and by extension, what makes a Spider-Man, or Spider-Woman, or person, whatever. If the first film concludes that anyone can wear the mask, then Across the Spider-Verse seeks to interrogate that conclusion. It primarily does this through Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, a futuristic, semi-vampiric future iteration of the wall crawler who has assembled a team of...
That nigga's an asshole, bruh. Like, that nigga's a real life asshole, bruh. Like, made me mad, bruh. That nigga's an asshole.
Spider people from across the multiverse to travel from dimension to dimension, containing anomalies caused by incursions from other universes. A zealous believer in predestination, Miguel is convinced that certain events, called canon events, must occur in order to keep a universe stable. For Spider people, these so-called canon events are primarily the traumas that define their story, namely the death of an uncle, a love interest, and a police captain. To Miguel, these events are an essential part of what makes spider people who they are and must occur to every spider person lest it tear their universe apart. He believes these interlopers threaten to disrupt the preordained canon of the universe they invade, which has the potential to destabilize the entire multiverse. Miguel isn't a villain per se, but he is certainly Miles Morales' primary antagonist for most of the story. He sees himself as the arbiter of order in the multiverse, and to him, Miles is the embodiment of the very instability he has dedicated his life to correcting. Not only was the Collider accident at the climax of Into the Spider-Verse directly responsible for triggering the many multiversal anomalies he and his Spider Society work to contain, but Miguel believes that Miles is the original anomaly, a random kid bitten by a spider from another universe, a spider that was meant for someone else. In Miguel's eyes, Miles shouldn't exist. He is the chaos of the multiverse incarnate, someone whose existence defies the preordained order of the multiverse.
That nigga's just a hater because Miles is the best. But the thing is, like, every Spider-Man has their own unique ability. But Miles is just different. Like, that nigga's real life just different, bruh.
An existential threat to the order he preserves and unworthy.
He different too, though. This nigga right here, like I said, they all got their own different skill set. Like, he different too, though. He different too.
The mantle he has misappropriated from a real Spider-Man. In a classic case of Lord and Miller meta-ness, Miguel's position reflects real-world contention over Miles' claim to the mantle. For those of you lucky enough to not be familiar with online Spider-Man discourse, and I'm sure there's probably like 2 of you, there has been a long-standing debate surrounding whether or not Miles Morales should even be considered Spider-Man in the same way that Peter Parker is, especially during the character's introduction in the comics back in the early 2000s. As a legacy character, does the title truly belong to him? A lot of this discussion is rooted in the racist idea that Spider-Man can't be Afro-Latino, or really anything other than white for that matter, or just really any person other than Peter Parker, despite decades of, alternate Spider-Man that beg to differ, but it doesn't matter, no, he has to be white and he has to be Peter Parker. The filmmakers behind Across the Spider-Verse cleverly take this real-world attitude and use it to inform the perspective of its antagonists, building a story that aims to test Miles' sense of self. Something I appreciated about the original Spider-Verse was the way it capitalized on the angst that comes with being a teenager, and the sequel is no different, doubling down on this aspect in every regard. And from a storytelling perspective, it's not hard to imagine why. Because, yeah, being a teen sucks. You're starting to feel like an adult and want to assert your independence, but are still being treated like a kid by your parents and teachers. The world is pulling you in every direction before you've even...
Because you are a kid, bro. You're a teenager, but you're a kid. And it's okay. It's okay to... come into one, figure yourself out. And it's okay to ask for help doing that. That's what's wrong with kids nowadays. I mean, kids in general, like, I was like that, like, not asking for help. I ain't gonna say ashamed to ask for help, but just, just keeping things to myself, or running to somebody when you could ask your parent or ask an adult, because they've been through it. And they're not going to steer you in the wrong direction no matter what your situation is. It could be you liking somebody, you liking a girl, or a girl liking a guy. It could be rejection. It could be embarrassment at school. It could be you not feeling confident, like you not having no style. Like, you might go to school and there might be a fashion show at school and you just don't look up to par. Like, you just got to talk to somebody, bruh. You know it is light at the end of the tunnel, like.
Even figured out who you want to be. New hormones are making your emotions deep and unpredictable, to the point where it feels like no one seems to get you. And every problem feels like it's the end of the world. It's hell. Now imagine all of that. Plus, you're also leading a double life as a costume crime fighter. It's a recipe for overwhelming anxiety, and that anxiety is the lifeblood of the film. Previous Spider-Man films have flirted with the idea of teenage Spider-Man, but seldom commit to it the way that Spider-Verse does. Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker spent maybe 20 minutes in high school before he was off living as an adult in Manhattan, while Andrew Garfield's Peter graduated at the beginning of his second film. Now, granted, that film managed to maintain the angsty teen melodrama despite that, but not everyone took to it, and I mean, look, Andrew Garfield doesn't look like a high schooler for much of the second movie. But when Tom Holland was cast, his relative youth promised a more high school-focused Spider-Man that would have to balance superhero problems with the angst of being a teen trying to maintain his social status. But while Homecoming, despite my personal lukewarm take on the film, mostly delivers on this promise, Holland's run pretty quickly succumbs to the MCU of it all, and it falls by the wayside. Peter's personal life takes a back seat to the stories involving Tony Stark and the Avengers, so much so that by the second film, there's basically no delineation between Peter's life and Spider-Man's. And that's a shame, because a key part of what makes Spider-Man's stories so compelling is his secret identity. The private nature of it means Spider-Man is forced to be withholding with the people he loves the most. He's only lying to protect them, but that lie often serves to create an emotional rift. You can only flake on a date or someone's birthday party so many times before they stop bothering to invite you. Beyond the spectacular melodrama of it all, this struggle to reconcile both sides of his life makes the character more relatable. While most of us can't understand what it would be like to have a literal alter ego, we can connect with not being able to tell someone we love why we've been letting them down, or the fear that comes with sharing your whole self with another person. This angst is something that is particularly pronounced when you're a young adult. Insecurities about who you are a huge part of growing up, and Across the Spider-Verse recognizes this. When we pick up with Miles, things are a little more complicated than they were at the end of the previous film. His commitment to being Spider-Man means he misses classes and family gatherings. He's constantly running late and leaving early, and has started to drift away from his parents who don't know he's Spider-Man. He wants to have it all, to excel at school, to get into an Ivy League college and make his parents proud. But his life as Spider-Man constantly gets in the way. The film really makes you feel the weight of this conflict, particularly in Miles' relationship with his parents. Jeff and Rio love their son dearly and want nothing more for him to live the best life he possibly can. But they're also struggling with the idea that he's growing up and that their relationship is changing as a result. In response to this, they helicopter parent him a little bit too much. For Miles, Spider-Man is an escape from that overbearing pressure. But ironically, in a lot of ways, it just makes the situation worse. The more time he spends on Spider-Man stuff, the less he has for them, which just causes them to tighten their grip on him. He could easily resolve this tension by telling them his secret, but this comes with its own set of anxieties. Miles is afraid that telling his parents might mean he has to stop being Spider-Man altogether. A big part of their overprotectiveness is driven by a fear that Miles is lost and at risk of falling down the wrong path like his Uncle Aaron. So it wouldn't be a stretch to imagine them freaking out about the huge risk he's taking and putting a stop to his Spider-Manning for good. Of course, you can't really ground Spider-Man, so it would probably just mean a total breakdown in their relationship. A relationship that, despite the drama, means the world to Miles. It would also probably push Miles more towards that Uncle Aaron side they're trying to prevent, by him giving into his power and the idea that he can use this power however he wants. He's not using his great power with great responsibility, and that comes by his parents being too overbearing and tightening their grip, especially if they know he's Spider-Man. In this way, the film almost likens revealing his secret identity to coming out. Miles wants to be out and proud about who he is, to be his whole self with his parents, but he's terrified that they won't understand, or worse, will reject him for it. He fantasizes about his parents embracing his secret, and maybe they would. After all, they're very upfront about the fact that they would love Miles no matter what. But at the same time, he knows he's been lying to them for a long time and is unsure if they'll be able to forgive that dishonesty, which is a big through line for most of the major players in this film. That fear, amplified by adolescent insecurity about who he wants to be, is what's holding him back from telling the truth, keeping him in the superhero closet, as it were. And the longer he puts it off, the worse the anxiety gets, the worse his relationship with his parents gets. As far as Miles is concerned, it's a terrible catch-22. At their core, Spider-Man stories are soap operas with spandex, grandiose, sweeping melodramas about interpersonal relationships, and Across the Spider-Verse fully embraces this in a way other Spider-Man movies, including its predecessor, haven't in a very long time. It's so refreshing to be engaged in the lives of these characters beyond just the thrill of the escapism. The melodrama of it all comes to a head when Gwen suddenly reappears in his life, having been sent to Miles' dimension by Miguel and the Spider Society to investigate an anomaly. Miles has spent the last few years longing for people who can understand what he's going through, his spider friends, and in particular, Gwen, who he has a not very subtle crush on. So Gwen's arrival only further complicates Miles' already uneven priorities. It's not a particularly straightforward situation for Gwen either. While Across the Spider-Verse is very much Miles Morales' story, Gwen is more of a co-lead this time around. I'd also argue it's kind of her story given how she opens and closes the film, which fills us in on the gaps in Gwen's story that were only ever alluded to previously. If you thought the teen drama of Miles' life was intense, oh my god, Gwen is all of that times 1,000. Like Miles, Gwen is struggling to maintain meaningful connections with those in her life. She can't find friends who understand her, and she won't try to let anyone in, and her relationship with her father, Captain Stacy, has become fraught since the death of Gwen's best friend, Peter Parker. Captain Stacy blames Spider-Woman for his death, not realizing that Peter had turned himself into the Lizard after years of bullying. Racked with guilt over the tragedy and yearning for the brief moments of companionship she had felt while spending time with Miles and her spider friends, Gwen jumps from band to band trying to find another group she can belong to. But every band she tries doesn't work out because of her inability to open up. But even if Gwen, the character, isn't willing to open up at this point, her pastel watercolor world betrays her emotional instability, serving as a personalized mood ring with colors constantly bleeding together, fading away, or intensifying to reflect the tone and emotions of any given situation. When Miguel's spider team shows up to contain a vulture from another universe, an incredible Da Vinci-looking motherfucker that continues to amplify the creativity on display, Gwen sees an opportunity to finally be with people she can relate to, a desire that is compounded when she's forced to reveal her identity to her father, who doesn't take it well. In a stunningly
Hey, that nigga was an asshole too. Like, that nigga just took his job too serious, bro.
heartbreaking moment, Gwen tries to reason with her father, begging him not to jump to conclusions, to not be a cop and be her dad. But his anger over the death of Peter and his duty as a police officer overcomes him, and in a moment of pure instinct, he raises his gun at his daughter in self-defense and continues serving her Miranda rights, ultimately shattering any trust left between them. Gwen's story is the ghost of Christmas future that Miles fears, the worst-case scenario in which coming out to his parents about his secret identity destroys their relationship. This prologue is almost hard to watch in how gut-wrenching it is, but it instantly made Gwen my favorite character in the film. It's an insanely effective tone setter that conveys the gravity of the themes being explored and the maturity with which they are. She is such a human character, seemingly aware that her refusal to let people in is what is pushing them away, yet unwilling to let her guard down. And moments like this crystallize that attitude. Why would she open up when opening up only ever leads to heartbreak? True to her teenage angst, Gwen's solution to this problem is to run away from home, joining the Spider Society, a group of people she thinks understand her and will embrace her and her individuality with open arms, as a way to avoid having to confront the mess her interpersonal life has become. At the beginning of the film, Gwen tells her bandmates that she didn't join a band to talk about her feelings, and that self-imposed isolation follows her into the Spider-Verse. Even surrounded by the people she thinks will understand her, she's still keeping secrets, whether it be from Miguel and Jessica Drew and even Miles. Years of keeping her identity bottled up have closed her off to the possibility of genuine intimacy. Why bother talking when no one understands anyway? But in doing so, she denies herself the opportunity to be understood. Her refusal to let people in is self-defeating, sabotaging her relationship with Miles, Jessica, Miguel, and her Peter. Despite this, Gwen's relationship with Miles is the beating heart of the film. Playing out like a classic teen romance, there's a charming innocence to their dynamic. They both clearly like one another intensely, but for one reason or another, they won't let themselves admit it. Well, at least Gwen won't. I mean, Miles thinks he's slick, but we all know that kid is crushing hard. Yet, they can't stop being drawn to each other. Reconnecting over a flirty, freeing swing through Brooklyn is a brief respite from the pressure of their real lives. You get the sense they feel truly alive when they're together, even if they realize it's only a fleeting moment. It's only once Gwen shows up that we get a glimpse of Miles' authentic self, uninhibited by the rest of the world. It's the moment he's been waiting for and thought he'd never get again. But there's still a distance there on Gwen's part. When Miles takes Gwen to his thinking spot to hang out, literally, you almost get the sense that Gwen wants to enjoy this moment in a vacuum the way Miles is, but that the gravity of her deception is weighing heavily on her, visually conveyed by the upside perspective. She teases him with the thought of running away together, but is quick to backpedal. Deep down, she realizes that what she knows about him is doomed to complicate their relationship the same way her secret identity broke her relationships with her dad or Peter. So, as she always does, she bottles it up, thinking it'll prevent the same thing happening with Miles. She realizes that either way, she can't have the relationship with him that she wants, and even kind of points to canon as a reason why Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy can never be together. Miles optimistically says, well, there's a first time for everything, because he believes that anything is possible. And that's the lesson he eventually imparts on to Gwen, but after everything that she's lost, she'd just rather hang on to that potential than willingly compromise it. If teen romances feel like the be-all, end-all of the world, Across the Spider-Verse literalizes that feeling for Gwen and Miles, and ultimately, things don't start getting better for Gwen until she finally opens up to both Miles and her father. Through Gwen and Captain Stacy's relationship, one of the film's major themes is expressed most clearly, namely that of control and autonomy. The central questions the film asks, what makes us who we are and is who we are predetermined, are fundamentally questions of control. Are we in control of who we are? As human beings, we want to be in control of our lives, of who we are in the universe. But at the same time, the uncertainty that implies is horrifying. If we're in control, then anything could go wrong. For parents, this existential terror is even more horrifying because it means surrendering the person you love most, your child, that little boy you've always looked after and cared for, to random chance. The natural response is to try and defy that disorder and exert control. We see that with Captain Stacy, who dedicates his life to hunting down Spider-Woman after he believes she's taken Gwen's only friend from her. He wants to make things right, but when he's confronted with the reality that the situation isn't so simple, that he can't just exert control to make the problem go away, he cracks. Miles' parents are going through a similar struggle as well. When Miles was a kid, they had total control over him. They could nurture him, guide him, and keep him safe, prevent him from making the same mistakes they perhaps did or saw a relative did. But now, he's a young adult. He wants to break free. Spread his wings, man, as Spider-Man not so subtly explains to Jeff. They want to believe he'll be alright, but they also can't help but see his distance from them as a sign they're losing him completely. so they tighten their grip, even though it just pushes him away further. This is as much a coming-of-age story for parents as it is for the teens here. Deep down, they know what they need to do, but much like the journey Miles went on in the first film, it's a leap of faith. Not only faith in their son, but faith in the job they've done raising him. In perhaps the most emotionally raw scene in the entire film, Rio tries to express her concerns to Miles. She wants to let him go out into the world and find himself, but she's worried the world won't look out for him the way she and Jeff do. The world can be so unfair and unlike home. It doesn't have his best interests at heart. She doesn't want to see it tear him down because she knows he deserves to be there as much as anyone else. But despite this, in an act of pure selflessness, Rio does the brave thing and stops trying to control Miles, giving him her blessing to go out into the world after Gwen. And while this decision leads Miles to jump headfirst into the multiverse where he's judged and discarded by Miguel and his peers, it's only through this experience that Miles can finally learn for himself what his parents have been telling him his entire life. That no one gets to tell him who he is and what he's capable of. By placing her trust in Miles, Rio risks losing her son, but she also gives him the opportunity to mature into a person and prove to himself that he can withstand the pressures of the world. Likewise, Gwen's disappearance forces Captain Stacy to reassess his priorities. If trying to control Gwen, even with the best of intentions, means never getting to see her again, it's not worth it. And as the adults in the relationship, it's his responsibility to take the first step in repairing the damage done. This paternalistic attitude is also what drives Miguel's crusade. Having transplanted himself in another universe in a desperate attempt to have a family only to lose them and their world to the chaos of the multiverse, Miguel wants to impose order. He becomes the overprotective father of the multiverse. But to do that, he needs to make sense of his suffering. If the multiverse is something to be tamed, then surely everything must have a meaning, even suffering. Thus, the canon events. The filmmakers kind of show their hand a little by calling these fixed and defining events canon. Rather than evoking a cosmic force of nature, the name recalls nerdy pedantry about what counts and what doesn't. It's a sly wink to the audience that when Miguel says that canon events, all of which just so happen to be incredibly traumatic events, are immutable, he's full of shit. It's clearly a trauma response. Miguel and the other spider people need to believe that moments like Uncle Ben's death were essential and necessary in defining who they are, because the alternative is that life can be cruel for no reason sometimes, and that's a bitter pill to swallow. In a meta sense, the film is also commenting on our own fixation on Spider-Man's suffering. Playing like the biggest subtweet of all time, Miguel's position reflects the attitude of a lot of fans who believe Spider-Man is defined by his trauma, and that a Spider-Man with no trauma is no Spider-Man at all. We saw this attitude most prominently in the response to Tom Holland's iteration, who notably lacks a lot of the suffering of previous incarnations. He makes little to no mention of Uncle Ben, has no Gwen Stacy, is pals with a billionaire, and as a result, lives quite a comfortable life with Aunt May. Now, some of that comfortability was taken a bit too far in my opinion, namely his receptiveness to Stark, since his core beliefs as a person go against a lot of what the character stands for, and I don't know, just being allergic to mentioning Uncle Ben feels a bit weird, but I digress. For a lot of the fans, this made Holland's Spider-Man feel illegitimate. How can you be Spider-Man if you aren't suffering? The backlash to this interpretation was so pronounced that by the final film in his trilogy, the creative team deliberately put Holland's Peter through the fucking ringer, taking away his comfortable life, his aunt, his friends, and his girlfriend like some kind of cosmic penance, a correction of the canon, if you will. Across the Spider-Verse questions this mentality. Why do we need Spider-Man to suffer? Is suffering all Spider-Man is? In essence, Miguel and the Spider Society are us, the audience, asking Miles to suffer to prove his legitimacy, to maintain the canon. But Miles rejects this notion. He knows that predestined trauma isn't what makes a spider person who they are, and he knows the canon is bullshit because he himself proves it. As he says earlier in the film, having a story to fit someone's stereotype so it's easier to accept that person is gross. Trauma isn't what makes a Spider-Man, it's their perseverance. Whether it's persevering through a tragedy or doing everything in their power to prevent one. Miles' refusal to accept the worldview that Miguel clings to only further affirms his belief that Miles is not a legitimate Spider-Man. But his dirty little secret is that his aggression towards Miles is driven more by self-loathing. Miles embodies everything Miguel hates about himself. As much as he tries to convince himself and others that Miles is the original anomaly, the truth is that Miguel is in fact the original anomaly. While we don't know for sure what his origins in the film are just yet, if it's anything like his origin in the comics, it actively defies his position on canon. Miguel was not bitten by a radioactive spider, nor did he lose a police captain or an uncle. Miles reminds Miguel that he's full of shit, a self-righteous hypocrite, and for that reason alone, he needs to remove him from the situation. This rivalry was a really clever way to frame this relationship given the real-world origins of these characters. In a lot of ways, Miles stands on the shoulders of Miguel, a mixed-race heir to Spider-Man, but where Miguel is relegated to an offshoot, the cyberpunk Spider-Man, Miles gets to be the real deal, Spider-Man with no caveats. So it was a stroke of genius to incorporate that context into the story itself, translating Miguel's role as a precursor to Miles into a paternal relationship in the film. Miguel is Miles' spider daddy, attempting to exert his authority over Miles with a characteristically 90s sense of self-importance. Because Spider-Man 2099 is like one of the most 90s things ever. Miguel is an extension of the authority figures in Miles' real life, his parents or his guidance counselor, trying to dictate how he should live his life and what his story needs to be. Miguel's insistence that every spider person must adhere to the canon is fundamentally no different from Miles' guidance counselor gleefully telling him to fabricate a sob story for his college application because it's what he needs to do to get into a top school. But Miles just can't buy into it. His parents have instilled in him a sense of self that simply won't allow him to buckle under the expectations of others. He wants to do his own thing, and he will. But if Miguel exists on one end of the spectrum, clinging to order and control to ease his suffering, then at the other end is the Spot, a malignant force of nature inflicting his suffering on the world. Every world. A victim of the Collider accident Miles caused at the end of Into the Spider-Verse, the Spot has lost everything. He's become a literal void, alone, broken, and empty. At first, he tries to fill his holes with a new identity, that of Spider-Man's arch-nemesis, but he's treated like a joke, villain of the week. So in retaliation...
Hey, no, that really pissed him off. Like, that really, like, that's what really made him, like, go to the extreme that he went to. When they kept playing with him, saying, they're like, this nigga's mid, like, he's just the villain of the week, like, that really just pissed him off. He's like, bro. Because in his mind, he like, yo, we're nemesis. Like, I'm your nemesis. Like, he gave his backstory. But that really made him go crazy, like insane. Like, he ain't like that, bro.
He sets his sights on inflicting his emptiness on others. The Spot is the logical conclusion of Miguel's mentality. If everything awful that has happened to you was meant to happen to you, then what's the point in ever trying to be good? Why not brace the void and give in to nihilism? For the Spot, personal tragedy is an invitation to disassociate from the consequences of your actions and act selfishly and destructively. We see this idea paralleled in Earth 42 when Miles confronts an alternate version of himself who, in a world without his father or Spider-Man, has become the Prowler. Like the Spot, this Miles has seemingly embraced fatalism. His father wasn't there to guide him, so he's taken after his Uncle Aaron and chosen the easy path, the path of self-gratification. When our Miles tries to reason with his shadowy self, you get the sense he is completely disassociating in a manner similar to the Spot, coldly telling Miles that his father dying isn't his concern, even though in reality our Miles' father is just another version of his. But he takes no solace in this fact because helping our Miles save his world would not make up for his own suffering. If anything, it just serves to taunt him further. He's the unluckiest version of himself. The struggle against the pull of apathy and nihilism also informs the film's exploration of Spider-Man's relationship to law and order. Like most superheroes, Spider-Man has traditionally embodied the idea that lawfulness and virtue go hand in hand. He's a crime fighter after all, his whole shtick is upholding the law. But as a vigilante, he also operates outside of the law, which directly contradicts his principle. If law equals virtue and Spider-Man is virtuous, then why does he work outside the law? Is that not a contradiction? Miguel's Spider Society personifies this tension, turning the concept of Spider-Manning into a literal police force, the Cannon Cops. Miles doesn't question this at first because he's just excited to be among peers, but he quickly becomes uneasy when Miguel chastises him for saving Inspector Singh's life in Mumbattan. Miles knows this was the morally correct thing to do, but Miguel's insistence that it was wrong because it violated the rules of canon lays bare the contraction at the heart of the...
Hey, that nigga's weird. That's what I'm saying. Like, I get what he meant. I get what he was trying to do, saying, "Hey, this right here put a dent into our time portal, so now other people like has to perish and things of that nature." But like any other regular person that's like that just understands the world, like, bro, this is morally wrong, bro. Us as being superheroes, we're supposed to stop anything from happening if we can. If we can. If we can stop death from happening, let's do that. His take is, hey, if I can get to it, cool. But I guess because he's like he's seen everything played out. To me, he kind of reminds me of Kang. Like, his situation, I think, like, he reminds me of Kang. Like, it's just bad. Like, he just bad energy, bro. I guess because his situation didn't go out how one of the two. He's like, man, everybody gotta die so this timeline can stay in flux. But
the whole endeavor.
Weird.
If protecting order takes precedence over doing the morally right thing, then what's the point of Spider-Man at all? This confrontation forces Miles to contend with what Spider-Man means to him and to us. Not only does a Spider-Man persevere, but he fights for what's right, even if it means breaking rules to do it. He doesn't just stand by and let something horrible happen just because everyone thinks it's what's supposed to happen, even if the everyone in question is other Spider people. Miles believes that the Spider Society should be the people saving the world from what might have been. It's this rebellious spirit that draws Hobie Brown, Spider-Punk, to Miles almost instantly. It would have been real easy to turn Hobie into nothing more than a cool aesthetic and an easy punchline. He's Cockney's Spider-Man with a mohawk. Miles is competition for Gwen's heart. But the filmmakers don't do that. Instead, they make him the MVP of the entire fucking film. Well, I mean, outside of Gwen, but you get it. It's moral center. Sure, they still throw a few jabs of his tendency to view everything through an anti-establishment lens.
What's that?
What if you could do SEO smarter and faster? With Wix, you can edit your meta tag.
It's a metaphor for capitalism.
But nevertheless, he is the only character in the film who gets it from the very start, blazing a trail for both Miles and Gwen to eventually follow. Hobie pieces out of the uncomfortably authoritarian Spider Society, helping Miles escape on his way out the door and setting Gwen up with a bootleg portal watch for when she's ready to join the good fight. He's the embodiment of Spider-Man's punk rock spirit. Miguel may be right that Miles wasn't supposed to become Spider-Man, but Hobie is there to remind us that
Yeah, so if y'all don't know, he's not supposed to be Spider-Man. The Spider-One's supposed to bite him. It's supposed to be biting the Miles Morales with the long hair. Because in their universe, they don't have a Spider-Man. So with them not having a Spider-Man, it's just crime. It's just terrible. So I guess I don't know how the Spider ended up being in his universe. I guess because it's two Miles Morales. So I guess they just went to him. But from my understanding, I thought that it was supposed to, well, from the movie, with I call him Dark Spider-Man. What the Dark Spider-Man said, he said it was supposed to bite Peter Parker, but it wasn't. It was supposed to bite the Miles Morales, the evil Miles Morales. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know how the Spider ended up getting there to bite that Miles Morales. Maybe it was something that they did. But the reason Peter Parker died is because it can only be one Spider-Man in that universe. And with it being Peter Parker, that was the original Spider-Man of that universe, when Miles Morales became Spider-Man, it threw everything off. That's the reason why all these Spider-Man right here are together, because all their dimensions is all ruined when Miles Morales became Spider-Man.
Spider-Man has never been confined by rigid ideas like fate or destiny, nor does he impose order on the world around him. Becoming Spider-Man is random chance, a roll of the dice, a freak accident, and imposing order on that is futile. Moreover, what defines Spider-Man is what he does in response to the chaotic happenstance of his origin. He chooses to do the right thing and help others. He chooses to use his great power with great responsibility. It's an act of righteous rebellion that Miles embodies. The film's rejection of authority is made explicit and literal in Captain Stacy's arc. Much like Miles, Hobie, and Gwen, Captain Stacy is caught between the law and what he knows is right. As a police officer, it's his job to hunt down Spider-Woman because she exists outside the parameters of the law he serves to uphold. But as a father, he knows his daughter is a moral person and that ultimately she is breaking the law to do good. Therefore, the film argues that the only justifiable resolution to this tension is to side with what is right, even if it means turning your back on the law. Captain Stacy chooses to resign from the police force to save his relationship with his daughter, while Miles and Gwen turn their backs on the Spider Society so that they can pursue real justice. Sometimes the only way to do the right thing in a broken system is to leave it entirely and start your own band. Across the Spider-Verse is a film as anarchic as the multiverse it depicts, and like its central characters, it resists being put in a box. By framing the concept of canon as a restrictive ideology that robs Spider people of their agency, the film makes a far more profound point about art itself. Deferring to canon and the expectations that come part and parcel with it reduces stories to a checklist of beats that need to be met, restricting storytellers and suffocating creativity. Like Miles and Hobie and Gwen and Captain Stacy, the film says, fuck all that, man. What's the point of an endless multiverse if everyone has to play the same tune? We'll do our own thing. Every element of this film is a celebration of the limitless potential of art when artists give themselves permission to throw away the rules and play freely. In a world where almost every multiverse story has felt specifically designed to check a series of boxes and score cheap thrills, Across the Spider-Verse embraces the inherent chaos of the concept to illustrate the rebellious essence of its central character. If Into the Spider-Verse changed the game, Across the Spider-Verse throws away the rules, and we're all the better for it.